my journey as a friar is with the conventual family, and that's where I met your pastor, Father Jamie. Some of you may have met Father Christopher Bissett, who is also a conventual that actually introduced me to the ACCUS. So what I did was I put together, or tried to put together, some thoughts and a little bit of history on one of the families, the early families, which I didn't know, but was actually quite large at once upon a time. And that's the Order of Friar Minors Recollect. And I think to understand them, we need to go back into the history of the order and look at just a brief history on how messy. I mean, I think if you look at the Dominicans, you look at the Jesuits, you look at the Augustinians, Benedictines maybe, I don't know, I don't know a lot about them, but if you look at the Order of Friars Minor, you will see that there are a number of different family traditions within the context of Franciscan identity. One is the Order of Friars Minor. You got the Order of Friars Minor Conventual, which sometimes they're known as the Black Franciscans because their habit is black, although that's not always true. Some of them wear gray, so you can't always go by that. The conventual friars are big in Europe. I think they're bigger over in the European countries than they are in the United States. We also have the Order of Friars Minor Capuchin, the Third Order Regulars, the Secular Franciscans. So the question kind of becomes, what in the world was Francis thinking? Did he set out to do all these different families? And I would say, no, that was not his intention. This is the bazillion-dollar question, and I think it continues today. This whole idea of poverty. What does it mean to be poor? And how is it expressed in fraternal life? And this debate caused a rift. I think it still causes a rift in many cases over how Franciscan identity is lived. Another big debate, and I saw it even with my own order with just the different provinces, and it becomes important later on, is this whole idea over higher education. Some of the friars in the province I was with, no. You had to beg, cry, promise, give blood, get permission from the Trinity to even go on for another master's beyond your master's of divinity. Whereas other conventual provinces say, you want to be a chemist? Fine, go here. Great. Great, you know. That whole idea of how much is too much is kind of expressed in that. Looking at poverty, and from the eyes of Francis, I think that this is kind of hard to read because there's a lot of stuff crammed in there. But I think what we need to look at is commerce in the Middle Ages. One of the great scholars, in my opinion, Bill Short, has a wonderful little book out called The Franciscans, and it's in a series of religious orders. He puts together a wonderful overview of the Order of Friars Minor and the different families and whatnot. And according to him is that in the Middle Ages, a means of control in the land. Commerce was very different in those days, and he who controls the purse controls the economy and those dependent on it for their livelihood. Now remember, Francis came from a merchant family, and he saw what money did. And I don't think Francis was so much against money per se, but as how you used it to control and browbeat people was what he was really, really against. And during the late 12th and 13th century, the papacy got their hand involved for a new currency, which also boosted the buck And the early rule just basically said you can do whatever, but you can't get money. No way money. Money was an evil system, bottom line. It was being used for private, I mean, does this sound familiar like in today's society? I thought it kind of did. Used for private advantage. The relationship for the friars and the Italian city-state was also being affected at this time. And academia was a sore subject in the Middle Ages through the Renaissance for the friars. And there was this debate about concern for the people, the disadvantaged, the poor, or do we have hermitages and kind of retreat to the outskirts of the city? These were two different thoughts within early Franciscanism. And if you look at this miserable map here, you can see how a headache could be very easily gotten when you look at the wider view of all the different orders of friars that were in the early days. You've got the Friends of the Community, which were more, let's have parishes, let's have houses, let's do ministry to the that we need these things to do our ministry. Then you have the spiritualists. We're like, no, we don't need all that. We need to be with the poor. We need to have our hermitages. We need to have that recollection. We need to have these types of things. And then you can see all these different splits. Now, the only one that really didn't split were the conventuals. They just kind of go straight down. And my formation, they absolutely said that the conventuals are the original group. Everybody else is reformed and they're no good. They're all a bunch of renegades. The conventuals are the original group of friars. And they use this map to justify that. If you notice, the Recollects are right here. And they come down from the French side of the 1415. And the Recollects are traditionally more on the contemplative. Is this map accurate, Jamie?
It's fascinating.
Is it? I just need to make a comment that Audrey actually did this PowerPoint for me because I was really pressed for time, and she really did a beautiful job of this because the original had all the Italian left in it. So she did a gorgeous job. But this here side, if you look here, this side is the more contemplative, the hermitage type of spirituality of the friars. Where the other side was the more, typically the more, let's have houses, let's do universities, let's be more active in the world, or the less contemplative, the less. And then Pope Leo in 1897 basically said, okay, because of the headaches that all you guys here are causing me, I'm going to form you up. Because some of those only had maybe 5 or 6 members. Some of them were very small, others of them were very large. Can you imagine, with all the different religious orders out there, trying to keep track of who's who and who's doing what? And Leo just said, okay, I'm done. I'm done. We're over this. And he reformed them in the Order of Friars Minor and the Leonine Union in 1897. So what you essentially end up with are the 3 main families in the first order are Order of Friars Minor Conventual, the Order of Friars Minor. Sometimes we refer to them as the Brownies because they were a habit similar to mine, and the Capuchins, which get their name from the hood, the pointed hood. And they don't have one of these little flimsy bibs. They have a big hood that comes down to the back that's pointed. And they are typically the more contemplative, the more penitential rite type of the family of Franciscans. Then you also have the second order, which I don't have up here. Those are the 4 Clares. And you have a plethora of different groups that follow the third order rule or the secular rule. And technically, we in the ACCUS follow a third order rule. And that is because Francis was very big on obedience to the Pope. Lord Pope needs obedience. And since we don't, that creates a real conflict for him. So what we do is it's been restructured to, not only do we take obedience to the, and I'll get to this a little bit later in our structure, to our guardian, but also to the bishop, as long as it's not contrary to our conscience or the rule. And the rule we follow is basically what the first order is, but it's rewritten to the third. These are key. The spiritualists, the strict, and then another split in 1517. You know, the Pope said, no, the conventuals are right. They can receive money. They can receive property. And the observance, you can stay in your hermitages. There was a period of time where the popes and the curia were very favorable to that whole idea of a hermitage and the strict observance of poverty. And you can kind of, here's another little map that kind of depicts the four Clares of St. Clare, and then the third order comes down to the third order regular.